Hello, we're starting laughing already.
That's what usually happens when you and I get together.
That's right. So Bernie, you are part of my Life at Apple video, and we've known each other for a long time. So introduce yourself and tell the audience how we met.
My name is Bernard Becker, and I have been revolving around the Apple universe since my brother and I bought a Macintosh 512KE in 1985. I worked at one point for an Apple dealership, which serviced businesses. Imagine an Apple and business in the same sentence. 9 out of the 10 law firms in Toronto used Macs. Nortel had 45,000 Macs worldwide.
And why is that? Why was that, actually? What was their attraction to Macintosh? Was it the 68,000 chip?
It was in the days of DOS. It was in the early days of Windows. So it was just so much easier to set up a network because the Mac came with Apple Talk and Apple Share built in. And for a Windows machine or for a DOS machine, you had to buy an operating system. These are in the bad old days of sort of Novell. So trying to hook everything up and make a network work is just difficult.
Now, we met at Elm Street Computer Terminal, correct?
The Elm Street Computer Terminal, yes. And
I have to say that I did not buy my first Mac from Elm Street. I bought it from Archon on Queen Street.
Okay, and I bought my first Mac at Computerland when there was one at Bloor and Bay.
Right. And I used to do consulting for them on the Mac side.
Yeah. And I found Elm Street as a retail customer difficult to use because they were very business focused. They were not retail focused in those days.
Right. So, with the Frantics comedy group, we decided to go all Macintosh, mainly because of the Apple Talk. I do recall that when we had the Apple Talk network installed, because as a 4-person comedy group, one of the things that we wanted to do was we all typed at different speeds, and we thought, a centralized network of computers would allow us to exchange digital versions of our sketches, and we wouldn't have to retype them over and over again, which is what we were doing with typewriters, right? I mean, we would literally have them next to us, and if we wanted to rewrite a sketch, we had to
type it again. Yeah,
type the whole thing again. By accident, the Frantics were the very first commercial installation of Apple Talk.
That's entirely possible.
But it seemed that I was the only person who had successfully installed it commercially, and they asked me to go to their different clients
and set it up for you.
And set it up for them. And I think that might have been one of the first times I became an Apple consultant. So that's what we're talking about on this video here, Apple consulting. So what else did we work on together?
I came up to your offices when you were at the CDC.
Right.
And you were the creative director, I think?
Head of TV comedy.
Head of TV comedy.
Yeah.
And you and I had the same furniture, the Strata furniture, which I'm sitting in office with. Yeah.
That's correct.
And I was the service manager at Elm Street, and I came up and did all of your service for stuff when it broke.
Now, that was interesting. We shared some kind of weird-ass terminal modem. Do you remember what that product was? That allowed multiple Mac users to use the same modem. And we used that to telnet into the Digital Equipment Corporation email system.
It was a Shiva net modem.
Yes, the Shiva net modem. People are watching.
I can't remember my children's names, but I can remember Shiva net modem.
People are going to watch this video and they're going to go, "What the fuck are they talking about?" The IT people didn't think that there'd be a hope in hell of us connecting into their deck mail, but it was, with your help, we got into it easily. I was able to use the Telnet app within HyperCard. So I was able to make a HyperCard link to their email system that I was
using
able...
Palm Toolbox tools.
Yes, and we were able to share emails, download emails, print emails, when the people who were using the DEC computers couldn't do it at all. They were really furious with us because we had this tiny Mac SE enclave. It was pretty robust. I don't recall anything going down that often.
Well, that's how I ultimately got hired at Apple, because I had done all of those weird networking things. When I was at Carlton Cards, I got a network of Macs hooked up to an IBM mainframe doing 3270 emulation and getting onto the mail and downloading files from the mainframe. And I had originally written a course for a company called Simon Ross and Associates.
Yes, I remember them. Yeah.
And Simon Ross had the contract to do all of Apple's training. So I would go up to Apple on Birchmount, and they had a second office at 80 Microcourt where they did all their technical training. And so even though I worked for Carlton Cards full-time, I would take time off, put on my Apple sweatshirt, and go train all of the dealers and staff who came up to Apple. And I wrote the Apple Network and Servers Gateway course, and I taught the Apple Talk networking course as well. And because I'd already started an internet service provider, when this weird internet thing started taking off, I actually knew how to get a Mac onto the internet. So I was setting up all of the services on a Mac when the Mac didn't even come with an IP stack. You had to load Mac TCP, and then you had to load Mac PPP in order to do a connection outbound. I was setting up, SMTP servers. That's how I got hired at Apple. I started teaching courses.
Now, you in a previous discussion, you told me two really incredible stories. So I'd like you to tell my viewers about those two stories in particular. Now, one, the business one, regarding what you learned about the importance of approaching people in power.
Or not avoiding.
Or yes.
Not approaching people in power.
I'd like you to recount that first, if you could, please,
Sure.
Bernie.
I started at Apple in 1997, and everyone was fleeing Apple at the time because they were weeks away from bankruptcy. So I figured the only way I actually snuck in was because everyone else was holding the door open while they were exiting.
And you're short, and no one would notice.
Sort of nipped in and got a job. I went down to the developers conference in 1997, and Gil Amelio was the president. And I was very excited, having been a Mac person since 85, to suddenly be A, working for Apple, and B, in California at the developers conference. It was heady days for me. And Gil Amelio was making a speech to about 5,000 Apple developers. And after he got done, I indicated to the guys in our group that I was going to go up and talk to him. And one of the senior system engineers at Apple, his name is Bruce Hogue, great guy, learned a lot from him. He said, "Stop, time out." What? He said, "Think for a moment, what are you going to say to him that could possibly help your career?" And I really had nothing. I mean, I wanted to go say hi, and he would have thought this would have been terribly annoying. Like, here's another guy. And he says, "Okay, now stop again and think for a moment, something you could say, anything you could say that could terminally end your career while you're speaking to him." And I was like, oh, I can think of lots of things my mouth could say that would just flatline me and sideline me as I had just started on this dream job. So he said, "If the big guys are over there, then we go that way." And to this day, I call it Bruce Hogue's, avoidance of power theory.
You mentioned something about being outside, and Gil Amelio was walking across some greenscape, and you could literally see people scurrying out of his way.
That was a sales conference in San Diego, and we were in a park where they had an event for everybody, and we were all standing on a hill talking to one of the people who had formerly worked for Apple Canada, Peter, who was the director of OS 9 marketing when OS 9 and OS 10 both coexisted. And Steve Jobs came towards Peter to talk to Peter. And Peter said to everybody, "F off." And
wow.
uh-oh, look who's coming. And it was a starburst, like something out of a firework. We all just turned 180 degrees and walked away. And so Steve came up, and one of our group didn't get the message to sort of disappear and wanted to talk to Steve Jobs. "Oh, Mr. Jobs, I am such a fan." And he said, "Who are you?" "Oh, my name is Dick Ryan." He's like, "Fuck off, Dick Ryan." And it slowly dawned on him that maybe he should have done what the rest of us had done and starburst and just here. So that's part of the avoidance of power is like, don't go where the bigwigs are. I have done that my entire career now.
I also understand that you have a Steve Jobs story. Can we hear that?
Yes. And it ties into the avoidance of power.
Okay.
When you went down to Macworld or to the developers conference, as an Apple employee, you were expected to help out. You had to volunteer for a day. So if we went down for a week to WWDC, you had to spend one day as a volunteer to help run the event. I mean, you're a paid Apple employee, so they put everybody to work to help get the event running. And on your day when you were supposed to volunteer, you would show up downstairs at the volunteer booth, ask what your detail was, and it might be greeting or stuffing bags with loot or doing whatever, standing in one part of the show and answering questions. I was told to go upstairs to a hallway and see a lady in the Moscone Convention Center. And I did. Went upstairs. And there's a little hallway and a door and one of those school desks, the little fold-up, all-in-one-piece metal school desks, which are fine when you're 10, but they're kind of hard to get into when you're 35. You sit here, and the names of all the reporters are on the sheet. When they show up, give them a water or give them a coffee and tell them Steve will be a few more minutes. And I thought, Steve who? So if Mossberg showed up and was waiting to speak to Steve Jobs, he could sit there until the previous interview was open.
And Mossberg is a major mucker too, right?
Yes. And I realized the Steve they were referring to on the other side of the door was the Steve. I don't want to be here. This is too close. But that was my detail. That was what I was assigned to do. So I got myself into this little folding school desk, and there was nobody there in the hallway. And behind the door, there was lots of screaming. And I really didn't want to be there. I learned later that apparently somebody had bought the wrong sort of water. Steve had a particular water that he drank.
Of course.
Okay. So I'm sitting in my little desk wishing I was somewhere else. And the screaming gets louder. The door opens. And Steve Jobs is holding 24 bottles of shrink-wrap water. And without looking, he throws it out the door. At me.
Not on purpose.
No, well, he just wanted to throw it out of the room. He didn't look out, see me, and take aim. He opened the door while yelling at someone in the room and threw the water out.
Yeah, so it was a tantrum. It was for affect, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, I was sitting in the path of 24 500 ml bottles of water, which is 12 kilo. It's 25 pounds of water. My math is correct. And I can't move because I'm stuck in this kiddie desk. So I tipped the whole desk over and ended up on the floor. The bottles hit the wall beside me and came akimbo flying out of the shrink wrap. And a moment later, the lady who I guess had bought the wrong water came out the door where the bottles had come from and finds me surrounded by bottles, lying on the floor with the desk on top of it.
Oh, my.
And then she was terribly concerned that I'd been hit. And I told her, I'm fine. He missed me. And at that point, she said, okay, you're done for today. I said, what? She says, you can't speak of this. It'll be the end of your career. And it was actually harder because a number of people did stuff down in Cupertino. And when they found out we actually worked for Apple Canada, it was more difficult because we were another country, citizens of somewhere else, and actually not technically part of Apple corporate, but part of Apple Canada or Apple Japan or whatever, which are technically separate companies. So it's harder to fire by fiat if you work in a different country for what is legally a different company.
So she wanted to fire you on the spot?
Well, no, there was always, if you saw something or did something.
Oh, I got you. Threatened you with firing.
Threatened you with being fired.
Gotcha.
So I told her where I worked, and she's like, oh.
Damn.
And she said, okay, you're done for today. No, you were always threatened. If one of the people from Apple Canada took pictures of Steve at an internal meeting, and Steve Jobs came down off the stage, took the camera, took the memory chip out, put it in his pocket, and gave her back the camera and said, "Look, we're at work. You don't take pictures of me at work. I don't take pictures of you at work."
Wow.
"And where do you work?" And she said, she was from the Quebec office, and she said, "I work for Apple Canada." And he knew, again, it would be difficult to threaten her with firing. And he went back up on stage and did his shtick. But there were times when if you did something, I was dumb enough to get up at a WWDC, took my Apple badge, and I put it in my shirt, and I got up in front of the microphone and asked about a rack mount Mac, because at the time people were asking for a rack mount Mac.
Mm-hmm.
And afterwards I got dragged onto the carpet and berated for talking about confidential, unreleased Apple products.
Which you knew nothing about. You just sort of guessed
Which I actually knew nothing about. I was lobbying for what ultimately became the Xserve, and it was already under development. So,
wow.
Oh boy, did I hear about that. And if I'd worked for Apple USA, that would have been my last day. But because I worked for Apple Canada, I just got a severe dressing down.
But that was a good guess.
It was inevitable. I wish there still was one.
We had one for a while. Willie, I won't mention his last name. You know Willie. He sent us one to play around with, and it was pretty awesome. Oh, look at this. Okay. There you go. The Xserve.
There's a cube here.
And that Xserve ran OS 10.
Yes.
Oh, yes, the cube, the toaster. Wow. Is that worth anything?
No, it's not even worth fixing.
There are a lot of Hackintoshes out there that have gutted them and then turned them into Hackintoshes. It's been pretty cool. You should check that online.
It's not viable. It's not a good thermal idea.
No. They put fans in. I mean, you can get a good, the ITX board will actually fit in there.
It's one of the things that Apple insists on doing over and over again is creating computers that can't adequately cool themselves or don't have fans.
Well, that's one of my bugaboos right now, is that I don't think there's a single Mac in their lineup that does not thermal throttle to some degree.
Yep.
So why would they put in these high-end components or even low-end components and not let these bloody computers work at least to their stated spec level? I don't get it.
Well, Apple used to make a lot of money replacing the power supplies in Mac Pluses. And the service manager, people would come in once a year and have the power supply board in their Mac Plus or in their whatever replaced. And I used to go to Active Surplus, buy these little metal muffin fans, cut a hole in the top where the handle went, and wire in a permanent fan once their warranty was over that actually sucked air through their Mac Plus in order to keep it cool.
We never, I just got rid of my Mac Plus like a couple of years ago. It had a Radius vertical monitor attached to it. Now, I think when they installed the Radius monitor, they actually put a fan in the Mac Plus because it couldn't handle that at the same time.
Was it Plus with a Radius card?
Yes.
Those had to actually be clamped over top of the existing video chip. It was only later with the SE that you actually could plug in daughter card.
Thank you. This has been absolutely fantastic, but I have one more question to ask. Did you ever work under the Herr Spindler era at Apple?
I wasn't at Apple at the time. I started at Apple in 97. I left in 2001, and Spindler was before that. When I was there, Gil Amelio was president.
Right, and he handed things off to Steve, who then fired him.
He didn't really hand things off. I forget who said it. It's Gil Amelio meets Steve Jobs, game over.
Steve had left, and Apple kind of turned bitchy towards him, right? Especially when he started Next. Where are you going? Oh my God, the flat Next. Okay.
It's a dump.
Yeah, so I remember being at one of many. I went to 3 different presentations of Herr Spindler. Treated everybody like children.
It was German.
And I remember standing up and I had dared asked what happened to Copeland, and he just was furious with me.
Yeah, those were interesting times.
Those were interesting times. Anyways, Thank you very much, Bernie. This has been fantastic. I appreciate the time that you've spent with me on my journey, Paul's journey at Apple, with Apple.
Yes.
So, till next time,
Next.
Bernie. Yeah, we'll talk again.